Gravity Rush is one of those experimental titles that tries its hand at a few things and doesn't quite hit the nail on the head, but it's definitely unique enough to make it worth playing through. Just keep in mind that it's a little rough around the edges. The star of the show is Kat, a mysterious girl with a cat named Dusty, who gives her the superpower to manipulate her own personal gravity, allowing her to fall in any direction, which mainly acts as flight. The story starts off with the typical amnesia plot point. I don't remember who I am or where I am, blah blah blah. It helps keep the audience involved since they're mainly on the same page as the protagonist, but it's obviously overused. Although, it works out a little better here because even the local citizenry don't really understand the way the world works. Strange monsters called Nevi occasionally appear to attack and even go so far as to swallow pieces of the city. With her newly acquired superpowers, it's up to Kat to save the day. There's really heavy influences from the American superhero genre, like Superman or Spider-Man. Kat is initially suspected as dangerous due to her powers, but little by little, she earns the trust of those around her to the point where people actually begin to rely upon her. A bunch of other stuff happens too, and the story goes all over the place, with an emphasis on distortions in space and time. It can be tough to follow, and the game ends rather early with some gaping plot holes, but the many characters and their fun personalities make it enjoyable nonetheless. The story is mostly pushed along via text and with these comic book style cutscenes, with a clear inspiration by French artist Mobius. Not only in the cutscenes either, but in the environment too. Check out the sketchy pencil effect for objects far off in the distance. I'm a big fan of comic book style storytelling being used creatively, and it's put to great work here, with panels twisting and turning and being placed on top of each other. This is more prominent earlier in the game rather than later, but the presentation carries itself well overall. I'm really disappointed in the text bubbles though. They're all just uncreative squares with a uniform font, and at worst the bubbles are pointlessly oversized and cover up the artwork. I can understand if this was done to make the game easier to translate into different languages, and having to edit more creative bubbles and fonts for each language would certainly be a lot of work. But that kind of effort is noticeable and definitely goes a long way. It's certainly not a deal breaker the way it is now, but it is a shame to think of what could have been. Gravity Rush is largely an open world style game, with at least half of the action comprised of exploring a large city. Kat's superpower makes this easy. Simply look in a direction, press the R1 button, and off you go, falling into the sky. Another press of the R1 button stops you in midair, while the L1 button resets your gravity back to normal. It's really fast, easy to do, and surprisingly exhilarating. Unlike other games with traditional flight, Kat is technically falling in a single direction, meaning she doesn't have a whole lot of control over her trajectory, and changing direction requires another press of the R1 button. It's a little awkward at first, but easily became the highlight of the game for me once I got used to it. Since Kat is literally manipulating gravity, she can use this to walk upside down or along the side of buildings. There's just something really exciting about this, and I haven't played another game with such free use of a gravity mechanic before. I'm not the kind of guy to adjust my head or body in reaction to a game, but I found myself doing it whenever I changed gravity around. I actually felt pretty sick to my stomach one day after I was playing for an extended period, although I'm not sure if that's the game's fault or if it was something I ate. Either way, the gameplay is surprisingly immersive. It's not quite perfect, and anything requiring precision is not one of Gravity Rush's stronger points. But it certainly never stopped being fun. Combat is definitely more lacking and takes a stronger criticism from me. On the ground, Cat has a simple combo of kicks that does hardly any damage, and she can also pick up objects near her and hurl them at enemies. But this is a little more awkward to utilize. Her true power lies in the gravity kick, which is a simple use of the square button while in midair. Just like falling with the R1 button, Cat kicks in the direction that she's looking in. This is pretty annoying since your thumb can't be on both the square button and the right stick, but holding the controller in a claw fashion so that your index finger reaches the square button alleviates this a little bit. Still, it's strange that the R2 button wasn't used for kicking. That's instead used for evading attacks, but that could have easily gone to the completely unused L2 button. This is excusable on the original PlayStation Vita release with its limited control scheme, but a huge opportunity to revamp the controls on the PlayStation 4 was missed here. It's a real shame, but that's hardly the worst of it with Gravity Rush's combat. The vast majority of enemies are the Nevi, a species of amorphous blobs that act as a collection of varying creatures. Their weak points are all highlighted, and they need to be attacked in each of these specific spots in order to finish them off. Since these weak points can be over, under, and all around a Nevi, it's just as much a challenge to navigate around a target as it can be to land a hit. Going back to having to use both the right analog stick and the square button to attack, it doesn't help that this can make combat incredibly awkward. Kind of like how Cat might not be quite up to terms with her powers and she's just learning to control them as much as the player is. Still, that's not an excuse for compromising gameplay. The worst offender, though, is the Nevi's artificial intelligence, or really, complete lack of intelligence. They'll often launch a single attack and then just sit there for a really long time before maybe attacking again. The enemy purposely leaves themselves wide open and do very little to fight back, making every encounter a breeze. Later on, a variety of special attacks are unlocked that deal a devastating amount of damage, and these attacks are on a simple timer. There's no charge that you have to build up by killing enemies or something like that. It's just an instant kill button that you can use every once in a while. With just a few upgrades, Cat's health can reach such high levels that she pretty much doesn't even have to bother with dodging attacks anymore. And each mission usually has several items scattered about to replenish your health just in case. The only real challenge in the whole game come in the form of 3 rare enemies that are hidden in some missions. These specific Nevi actually hit really hard and require the player to carefully dodge their attacks and position themselves efficiently. They're challenging and fun battles, but very short-lived. In the end, Gravity Rush lasted me about 8 hours before the credits suddenly popped up. There are a collection of short challenges and the DLC missions from the original Vita release are included here as well, but it's all very easy to complete and amounts to maybe another 4 or 5 hours total. Navigation and exploration are incredibly fun, and while the combat is alright, it left me wanting a whole lot more. What really helped carry me through this game was the mesmerizing artwork, the fun characters, the great writing, and the cool music, which is a kind of jazz fusion that goes anywhere from chilled out to hard rock to epic and triumphant scores. The lack of any real challenge makes this out to be less of a game and more of an interactive story. The awkward controls are a bit of a barrier at first, but it's mastered quickly and the game never demands enough from the player in return. On top of that, there are a couple of unnecessary stealth segments and a few segments that actually strip you of your gravity powers. This is a shame because the real meat of the game comes from manipulating gravity. And then there's the stealth section without gravity powers, and that's easily the low point of the game. As such, it almost feels like Gravity Rush would have been more appropriate in any other medium. But there's definitely potential here to expand upon the gameplay concept of freely manipulating gravity. To put it another way, I'm really hoping that the sequel completely blows me away. Thank you for watching my review of Gravity Rush. If you enjoyed this video, click the like button, and if you'd like to see more, subscribe.